July 3, 1973, the final night at Hammersmith Odeon. David Bowie had just begun singing the magical opening melody of Moonage Daydream when suddenly his voice cut out. During Ziggy Stardust's farewell concert, in front of 3,000 fans, the microphone went completely silent. The music continued, Mick Ronson's guitar rang out, but Bowie's voice was gone. Just as the audience was about to panic, the rock star's next move wrote the perfect ending for both the Ziggy character and music history. A technical malfunction had transformed into legendary performance. If you're listening to this story and want to learn more, please don't forget to subscribe, because the truth behind that night's events is an unforgettable lesson in how art can triumph over technology. Backstage at Hammersmith Odeon that evening, there was unusual activity. This wasn't just any concert. David Bowie was about to kill off the Ziggy Stardust character forever. The Ziggy Stardust tour was ending after exactly 1,802 shows over a year and a half, and everyone knew this would be one of rock history's most important farewells. However, the technical crew backstage carried a secret worry that nobody else knew about. Head technician Malcolm Davies had been noticing strange fluctuations in the electrical system since that morning. Hammersmith Odeon was a historic building constructed in 1932, and its electrical infrastructure wasn't designed for modern rock concerts. Bowie's stage show was particularly demanding: hundreds of bulbs, colored spotlights, rotating disco balls, and of course high-powered amplifiers. The electrical panel had been making weird noises all day, Davies would recall years later, but nobody could risk cancelling Bowie's final Ziggy concert. Meanwhile, in Bowie's dressing room, a completely different drama was unfolding. The rock star was putting on the iconic Ziggy costume for the last time, working with costume designer Freddie Barretti. The bright red hair, glitter makeup and metallic jumpsuit, every detail was perfect, but there was deep melancholy in Bowie's eyes. David was very quiet that night, Barretti would remember. Killing Ziggy was like losing a child for him. The Spiders from Mars were experiencing similar emotions. Mick Ronson, Trevor Bolder and Woody Woodmansey had only been informed of Bowie's decision a few hours earlier. The band members were shocked and worried because Ziggy's end also meant the beginning of their own journey into uncertainty. Ronson was especially tense because the guitar solo in Moonage Daydream held great significance for him. Sound technician Brian Jenkins was doing his final checks backstage, testing each microphone individually. Bowie's main microphone was a specially ordered Shure SM58 model that had never given any problems throughout the tour. Jenkins checked the cables, adjusted signal levels, and made sure everything was perfect. However, the general instability in the electrical system continued to worry him. When the doors opened at 8:30 p.m., the crowd flooding into Hammersmith Odeon was absolutely wild. Fans wanting to say goodbye to Ziggy Stardust had bought their tickets months in advance. Many had come in costume, glittery makeup, metallic clothes, colorful hair. The Hammersmith area had turned into a glam rock festival that night. In the front rows, a 17-year-old fan named Jenny Morrison had traveled from Glasgow and spent the night outside to see Bowie. "Ziggy had changed my life," she would recount years later. "Missing that night would have meant losing the world to me." What Jenny didn't know was that the performance she was about to witness would become one of music history's most extraordinary moments. At exactly 9:15 p.m., the lights went out and screams rose throughout Hammersmith Odeon. Fragments of Beethoven's Ode to Joy began playing through the speakers. This was the traditional opening for Ziggy concerts. Backstage, Bowie looked in the mirror one last time. Ziggy Stardust was ready for his final performance. Taking the stage with Hang On To Yourself, Bowie immediately mesmerized the 3,000-strong crowd. Every glitter speck on his costume sparkled in the stage lights. Every movement flowed with perfect choreography. The first 5 songs went nearly perfectly. Ziggy Stardust, Watch That Man, followed by a masterful medley of Wild-Eyed Boy from Freecloud, All the Young Dudes, and Oh You Pretty Things. The audience was captivated by the show's magic. Bowie's stage charisma was at its peak that night. Every song transition, every dance move, every eye contact felt like part of a magical ritual. The technical crew was beginning to breathe easier because everything was going according to plan. But right then, the sixth song of the concert, Moonage Daydream, was about to begin. This song told the story of Ziggy's arrival from space and was one of the album's most mystical pieces. Bowie approached his microphone. Ronson began the guitar's opening notes, and that magical opening melody filled Hammersmith Odeon. Everyone held their breath, because this song had special meaning for the Ziggy character. "I'm an alligator." Just as Bowie was about to sing his first words, his microphone completely cut out. The sound suddenly vanished. Ronson's guitar continued playing, the rhythm section kept going, but Bowie's voice was gone. For the first second, everyone thought this was an intentional pause. By the second second, doubt began. By the third second, panic. Audience members started looking at each other. This was Ziggy's final concert, and something was going very wrong. Backstage, Malcolm Davies had panicked and was rushing to backup microphones. Brian Jenkins was checking signal levels. Everyone was trying to find a solution. But Bowie never panicked. The moment he realized his microphone had cut out, he acted as if he had planned this situation in advance. First he looked at his microphone, then at the audience, and in that moment he did something that immortalized both the technical failure and the Ziggy character. Bowie dropped his microphone and threw it toward the edge of the stage. Then he raised his arms toward the sky, as if trying to catch signals from space. Moonage Daydream continued playing, and Bowie began dancing silently. But this wasn't ordinary dancing. This was a performance that told a story through pure physicality, needing no words. Bowie's move was so mesmerizing that after the initial shock, the audience began to be enchanted. The rock star danced as if the Ziggy character was actually returning to space. His arms moved in waves through the air, his body in perfect harmony with the music's rhythm. As the glitter sparkled in the stage lights, Ziggy seemed to be transitioning to another dimension. Jenny Morrison would remember that moment this way. "At first I was scared. I thought the concert was over. But then I saw what Bowie was doing, and I was breathless. I had never seen anything so magical. It was like he was actually communicating with aliens." Mick Ronson understood the situation on stage and intensified his guitar playing even more. It was as if he was trying to compensate for Bowie's silence with his own instrument. Trevor Bolder and Woody Woodmansey also concentrated even more intensely on the music. The band was managing to keep Moonage Daydream alive without vocals. Meanwhile, backstage, Davies and Jenkins were frantically searching for solutions. Backup microphones were prepared, cables were changed, but Bowie was now performing an alternative show, and intervening would break this spell. As the instrumental section of Moonage Daydream progressed, Bowie's dance became even more intense. He was no longer just dancing, he seemed to be interpreting messages from space. His hands moved in the air like sign language, his eyes half closed with a mystical expression. The audience watched mesmerized. The 3,000-person venue was nearly silent. You could only hear the music and Bowie's footsteps. This was a moment unlike anything in rock history. A space opera told solely through body language, without vocals. When the song's second section arrived, Bowie suddenly walked toward the edge of the stage. There he picked up one of the backup microphones and returned to center stage. But this time, he didn't turn on the microphone. Instead, he continued dancing, using the microphone like a space instrument, as if this device was being used to catch signals from space. Davies had finally solved the problem with the main microphone system. A fuse had blown in the electrical panel, and the backup system hadn't kicked in. But now he faced a different problem. Was it appropriate to interfere with Bowie's performance? He tried signaling to Bowie from the side of the stage, but the rock star pretended not to notice him. Bowie was in his own world, and that world was perfect. Sound technician Jenkins would later describe this moment. "David's performance was so mesmerizing that we didn't dare interfere. At that moment we weren't experiencing a technical failure, we were experiencing art." Near the end of Moonage Daydream, Bowie finally picked up the working microphone and sang the song's final chorus, but his voice came out so soft and mystical that it seemed like a message truly from space. When the song ended, Hammersmith Odeon gave a standing ovation that lasted for minutes. After the Moonage Daydream incident, the concert returned to normal, but the atmosphere had completely changed. The audience was no longer in a normal concert, but almost in a mystical experience. What Bowie had done was transform a technical problem into an artistic show, and everyone was under its spell. Changes and Space Oddity went perfectly as expected. As the concert approached its end, everyone waited for Bowie's big announcement. And finally, that moment came. Before Rock and Roll Suicide, Bowie approached the microphone and spoke his unforgettable words. "Of all the shows on this tour, this particular show will remain with us the longest, because it's not only the last show of the tour, but it's the last show we'll ever do." But now everyone knew that the night's most magical moment wasn't this announcement, but the microphone miracle during Moonage Daydream. After the concert ended, a big discussion began backstage. When Davies and Jenkins went to apologize to Bowie about the microphone failure, the rock star's reaction surprised them. "There's nothing to apologize for," Bowie said with a smile. "That was the most magical stage moment I've ever experienced." But the interesting part emerged in Bowie's conversation with costume designer Freddie Barretti in his dressing room. Bowie confessed that when the microphone cut out, he panicked for a very brief moment, but then realized this could be the perfect farewell for the Ziggy character. Ziggy came from space. He should return to space, Bowie said. The microphone failure became the perfect metaphor for that. As Freddie Barretti would reveal years later, Bowie had actually been planning how to kill Ziggy for months. He had thought of different scenarios, designed different final scenes, but the unexpected situation that night had created a more perfect result than any plan could achieve. The next morning, the British music press expressed their admiration, talking about the Moonage Daydream performance. Melody Maker ran the headline, "Bowie transforms technical failure into art." NME went with Ziggy's return to space, the wordless song. The most interesting comment came from Music Week magazine. David Bowie proved last night that music can be told not only with voice, but also with body. The Moonage Daydream performance will be remembered as one of rock history's most creative improvisations. A few days after the concert, on the music program broadcast on BBC Radio 1, host John Peel made this comment. Bowie's microphone performance at Hammersmith showed how the true genius of an artist can triumph over technical difficulties. This became an unplanned but perfect work of art. Malcolm Davis said that after that night, he experienced moments throughout his career that he could never forget. "I never experienced anything like this in my 30-year technician career," he would recount in his retirement. Usually technical failures are disasters, but Bowie turned it into art. "That night I felt I was not just a technician, but a witness to art history." Brian Jenkins evaluated the situation from a different perspective. "David's reaction taught me what artistry means. Most musicians would panic if the microphone cut out, the concert would stop. But a real artist makes every situation part of their creativity." Sarah Walsh, the lighting technician who was with the crew that night, said she could never forget the moments when Bowie danced. When the spotlights were on him, he really looked like an alien. The glitter, the costume, the dance, everything was in perfect harmony. This wasn't coincidence, it was pure genius. Jenny Morrison said that the performance she watched from the front row changed her life. "Until that moment, I thought music was only for listening, but Bowie taught me that music could be seen, experienced. When the microphone cut out, I was scared, but then I was enchanted." Many other fans from Hammersmith experienced similar things. 18-year-old Mark Stevens described the performance this way. "At first I couldn't understand what was happening. Then I saw Bowie start dancing, and I was breathless. This wasn't just a concert, it was theatre, art, magic, everything." 20-year-old fan Carol Wheeler described the emotional intensity this way. "I started crying. We were saying goodbye to Ziggy, and he was saying goodbye with that magnificent performance. I had never been so affected by anything." The Moonage Daydream microphone performance began to be known in later years as one of rock history's most creative improvisations. Music academics began studying this moment as an example of the transformation of technical failure into art. In the 1980s, at Berklee College of Music in America, Bowie's performance was on the required viewing list for the Rock Performance Techniques course. Professor Richard Matthews, who taught the course, told his students, "A true artist makes every situation part of their creativity." Bowie's performance demonstrates the power of improvisation. Modern performance art experts also began using this event as a reference point. In a 2010 interview, Marina Abramovich commented, "Bowie's performance at Hammersmith was one of the rare moments where music met performance art." In interviews David Bowie gave years later, he always described that night as one of the memories that held a special place. In a 1999 interview with Rolling Stone magazine, he said, "During the period when I decided to kill Ziggy, I was looking for a perfect ending. The microphone failure was like a divine sign for that." In a 2003 BBC radio interview, he gave a more detailed explanation. "The moment I realized the microphone had cut out, my first reaction was panic. But then I thought, Ziggy came from space. Maybe silence is his way of returning to space. This thought calmed me, and I started dancing." The most striking confession came in his final interview in 2016, shortly before his death. In an interview with The Guardian, Bowie said, "One of the most creative moments of my life happened during that microphone failure. Sometimes the greatest works of art are born when control slips from our hands." This performance continued to show its influence in Bowie's subsequent concerts. During the 1976 Station to Station tour, Bowie would deliberately turn off the microphone during some songs and perform dance sequences. This became known among fans as the Hammersmith effect. During the 1987 Glass Spider tour, while singing Moonage Daydream, Bowie would deliberately create a section of silence and perform that legendary dance again. This created magical moments for both old fans and the new generation. After Bowie's death, at memorial concerts organized in 2016, many artists tried to recreate the Moonage Daydream performance. However, none could capture the magic of that night, because that moment was unplanned and unrepeatable magic. This story shows us that art can sometimes be born in the most unexpected moments, even within the most technical problems. That night, David Bowie didn't just lose his microphone, he found his true genius, and Ziggy Stardust discovered the perfect way to return to space.